recording is started. We want to welcome everyone to this Georgia State University Africana Studies Freedom School 2022 to 2023. And if you have been with us, you know that all this week we have been celebrating and commemorating the student uprising 30 years ago that made it possible for us to have an Africana Studies department here at Georgia State. And I'm just really pleased and happy to facilitate this particular Freedom School tonight, because we have 4 amazing scholars, all of whom I have known, I think most of them since they were undergraduates. I believe just about everybody since they were undergraduates, except maybe for perhaps Dr. Gibson. And have watched them go through the Africana Studies Department, and now each one is representing our field in a powerful way at different places. Tonight we have Dr. Grace Gibson, who is representing her Deltas as always, from Virginia Commonwealth University. We also have Dr. Ife Tayo Obuya.
Hello.
Right, coming from Oakland, now back to Philadelphia at Temple University. We have Dr. Cameron Herman. How you doing, brother? Right, at Buffalo State University. And then we have, I'm sorry, y'all, I gotta say she's my favorite, because I think she was my first, I believe, to graduate from the master's program. Dr. Asantewa Suni Ali, newly tenured, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, at Kent State University. So first of all, welcome home, everybody. Welcome back, welcome home. We're so glad to see everybody. Now, I've been told by several of my colleagues that we're probably not going to get much done, because we're going to ask one question and y'all just going to yabber on. and so we're not going to get a wide breadth of subjects, but I refute that. I believe that we're going to have some conversation, but I would like, first of all, for you each to take some time, and we'll maybe even in the order that we started, just our whole subject tonight is Africana Studies from one generation to the next. Y'all are that latest generation of Africana scholars. I'd like you to each talk about your personal journey to and through Africana Studies, how you came to be here at this moment. If you could each just take a few minutes to talk about that, I'd appreciate it. Dr. Gibson, would you like to start there?
Sure. And I also want to say I'm proud that I'm in a Department of African American Studies, Africana Studies Program at VCU. So I want to make sure I put that shout out there, because I'm continuing on, because it truly is an investment to be a part of this discipline. So, which leads into how I got in. So I was actually working at Georgia State University as an advisor, and was just kind of wanted to take some classes. And I became a postbac, and I took a class with Dr. Gales, his Intro to Africana Studies course, AS 2010. And I remember sitting in the class like, okay, I'm really digging this. I'm feeling this. And, sitting in my mind saying, why didn't I do this in undergrad? Why, how did I miss this? All of that. And so took the course, and I remember him encouraging me to think about considering doing the master's in African American Studies. At the time, it was African American Studies at Georgia State. And, I'm thinking like, Lord, man, I'm already, I'm already one master's in. I'm working. I'm not sure if I had the time and all that good stuff. So he truly encouraged me. I applied. I got in, and I was able to come into Georgia State in the MA program in African American Studies, doing research in pop culture and comic books. And so this is where I realized that I could talk about my love of comic books, the Black experience, and blend those two worlds together. And really found a second home in the department. So I kind of felt like, the folks who were there in undergrad, they had already had, the built-in foundation. I kind of came in the new and kind of like built in and got in afterwards. But, folks took me in. So I definitely felt like I was for sure family. And so, got into the program, and that it changed my life. Let me tell you, everybody in that department changed my life to the fullest, even to this day, literally to this day. I wouldn't be where I am because of the Department of Africana Studies at Georgia State. I can name every professor, who has made an impact, including Dr. Akinyela, because I remember being in his class and being like, oh no, you're gonna get this right. We're gonna get this paper together. Let me connect you with some people. Let me make sure we get, they had our back, and they were very much invested in making sure that we got through. I remember Dr. Mosier made it his business to make sure that I could go and travel to conferences and make sure that I could get funding to do so. So it really, truly was an investment on their part, which made it an investment for me. As a result, I end up applying to PhD programs in African American Studies, and left the city of Atlanta and went on my way onto the West Coast, and went to UC Berkeley. Pursued the degree there, got the degree, and finished in 2019, and was very much all in it, deep in it as well there. Came on back, did a postdoc at University of Rochester in their African American Studies Institute. And then finally, I made my way on down to Richmond, Virginia, where I'm currently at VCU. And the ride has been one that has been filled with many blessings, and I'm truly just appreciative to be able to get in when I did. And I said, being able to now help the next generation of Africana Studies students is truly a pleasure and delight. So like I said, I wouldn't be where I was without the department and without the faculty there. So yeah, and grateful and thankful to them.
Thank you. Dr. Herman, tell us about your journey.
What's going on, man? It's good to see you.
It's good to see you.
So I'm laughing because I haven't seen Dr. Akinyela in some years, but Dr. Akinyela was my mentor for the McNair program, which was, like in the ways that Dr. Gibson talked about, Mosier making it his business to make sure that she succeeded. Mosier also pulled my coattail and told me about the McNair program because I was an undergrad trying to figure out what I was doing. And I remember watching my history professor talk about, in the intro to African American history, the brother who was teaching, listening to him and realizing and taking all these classes as a transfer student to Georgia State, and realizing, I could do this as a career, the stuff that I'm interested in, on my own. I was an accounting major at my previous institution, and I'm coming over here trying to figure out, well, what am I gonna do? Because it ain't that. And I'm reading and stuff like that, and I'm getting a chance I'm seeing these people in my lives and in my classrooms doing this work and doing it with a level of passion that really resonated with me. So I remember poking around the office, what do I got to do this research or be a professor, do this stuff? You got to get a PhD. Okay, what's a PhD? What do I got to do? You got to get some research. You got to do some research. Okay, how do I get some research? And Mosier started poking around for me. I had a brief thing with Dr. Presley that I was trying to do. And then the next summer, I was in the McNair program and it just took off. The level of investment and care that my professors, the professors in the department, and even the staff with Ms. Futrell and the people, in the department, we could always go up to the 9th floor, knock on that door, or not even knock on the door, just open it up and walk in, and we were home. We were home. And that level of care and attentiveness, not just to myself as, as a student, but as, as a person, making sure that I was okay, making sure that there was food around and stuff like that, pushing us into opportunities and then holding us accountable for excellence. It wasn't none of that slacking in our department, and it really set me up. And I think it set a lot of us up to go out and be, a force in the places where we walked into. I've been listening to the panelists this week talking about where they are and how they move in the world. And I'm like, yeah, that comes out of our department. So I graduated in 2007. Dr. Jones sent me in to Kwasi Obuya up the road to Louisville when we got our master's in Pan-African Studies with Dr. Rajak Talley, Dr. Ricky Jones, and the crew up there. And that kind of opened up, for me, my world, and kind of traveling and seeing, different places and understanding that there's a lot of different voices and perspectives under the Africana Studies but going to conferences and things like that. And the departments established, provided a foundation for me to see myself as a scholar who is also committed to doing the work of making sure that work isn't attached to the communities that we come from. So I took that with me into sociology. I got my PhD in sociology, and that was a whole experience. But I can only imagine how differently prepared I would have been going into a sociology PhD program without having this foundation of Black studies. Because when I walked in the doors at Michigan State, I knew who I was. I knew what I brought to the table, and I knew how to move through that field in a way that was very critical and engaging and stuff like that. But it was always with this notion in the back of my head that what I do in these classrooms only matters as much as how I can put it into activity and to connect it to the communities that I'm from. So that's kind of a brief history.
Appreciate that. We're gonna come back to that question too about how y'all have used what you got coming through Africana Studies in the academy for yourselves today. Dr. Flannery, Obuya.
Hello.
Hey.
Peace. Hotep. I'm at Temple. Alafia to all my people out there. It's so good to see y'all good looking Black people once again. I do feel like Georgia State is my home. Atlanta is my home. I'm in Philadelphia right now. And Georgia State, I entered Georgia State in 2004. And I think it was actually in my freshman year when I was a biology major. I was advised, like, take a African American Studies class to fulfill or whatever, humanities, whatever. And I never heard of it. And anyways, that class turned me out. I had a whole change, like Grace said, over the next couple of years. Believe it or not, I was actually very introverted, very quiet, very reserved person when I entered Georgia State University. And I believe it's very important to not just talk about just the intellectual rigor, but the animation of my personality as a person of African descent, the confidence, the newness. I really believe African American Studies, Africana Studies is its own reparations project that we're doing for ourselves. And I will never forget Georgia State. It's very good to have this sort of next generation conversation. A lot of times I tell my students that I was very privileged to be one of the first groups of people who was able to get an undergraduate, master's, and a PhD all within the field. That was not always available. And I think, we're still in the observation period of seeing like what is to come from things of that nature. Georgia State is one of the premier schools. It was where I learned about NCBS through Dr. Charles Jones, who forced me to do my first conference presentation. I was so scared, and now I'm on the board of NCBS. And so I know we'll get into different things that later, like in terms of matriculation, but Georgia State is a place that's home. It's a political site. It's a social movement. It's an academic site. It's a home place for the evolution of Black people that find themselves in Atlanta. So welcome.
Well, thank you, Dr. Obuya. And Dr. Suni Ali, tell us about your journey.
Yes. So putting me last, everybody stole all the things that I wanted to say. So I'm very happy to be here, just as my panelists have expressed. I echo so much of what was said just around the support that the Department of Africana Studies, when I was there as a Department of African American Studies at Georgia State, just the support, the modeling, the ushering through was vital and continues to be just a grounding for me. It was very foundational. I came to Africana Studies. Actually, I probably took my first Africana Studies course when I was in my mom's womb, like just to keep it all the way real. I grew up in an African-centered family and extended community. In fact, Dr. Akinyela, we grew up calling him Baba Makungu, as a part of that extended family and community. And so I came to this very early on, but in the academic sense, I took my first Africana Studies course in undergrad when I was at Brooklyn College in New York. I was a theater major. I had moved to New York at 18, didn't even get into any schools. I wanted to be on Broadway, and that's what I was going to New York to do. I attended several different schools. I wound up at Brooklyn College majoring in theater. I realized very quickly, which I had known from the other acting conservatories that I attended, that seeing reflections of myself and being honored as a Black young woman in that space was not something that I was going to experience, not at Brooklyn College. And so I heard about a Black theater course that was a cross-listing between Africana Studies and theater. And so, of course, I was all over it. Like, I need to be in this class. I took the class, fell completely in love with the professor who became one of my mentors. I began to see myself in the thing that I was so passionate about. And then from there, I started to take more. I was like, what is this? I had never even heard of Africana Studies. In fact, I laughed at it, I think, when I first heard it, like, what is that? Africana Studies. But I was in love at that point, because I was like, oh, wait a minute, I get to study me. Like, I get to learn about who I am and the things that we've done in the world and how we've made contributions to the world. And so I started to take classes, just, leisurely, not thinking that I'm going to get my degree in this. Mm-hmm. There was an opportunity for me to go to Ghana, and it was actually the senior trip for Africana Studies majors. I wasn't a major, I wasn't a minor. I'm still a theater major, just taking the classes just for the joy and the love of it. So I do the Ghana trip, and when I get back, the chair says to me, I think you might want to do a minor, because at this point you fulfilled all the requirements for a minor, and you only need X, Y, Z, to fulfill your requirements for a major. So what I ended up doing is dropping theater as my major, because I was like, to hell with y'all. And I made Africana Studies my major. And so that's how I got into the field. And from there, I heard that there was an African American Studies master's program that Georgia State was developing at the time, because I graduated from Brooklyn College in 2006. So I don't think the master's program started at Georgia State until 2008. Mm-hmm. I believe so. And so I waited. I moved back home to Georgia in 2007, and I waited. I said, I'm just going to wait. I'm going to sit it out and wait for this program to start. And so I joined the inaugural class of the master's program at Georgia State. As I said it already, everyone was great. I know we'll have more opportunities to talk about specifically how that experience, my experience at Georgia State, helped to propel me forward. But I'll kind of skip ahead. After Georgia State, I felt grounded enough to go back to my love of theater. And so I got my PhD in theater for youth. So much of what I experienced I was at Arizona State University. So not only was it a PWI, it was also a predominantly white state. I was in Tempe, Arizona. So literally, a white desert. And so much of what I had learned and so much of the cultural grounding that I received allowed me to be able to move through that space, not only in terms of surviving, but thriving and being confident about who I was and what I was bringing to the table, and knowing that I had to bring Africana Studies to those conversations in the classroom and challenge those teachers in ways that I didn't know how to do in undergrad when I was in theater. So from there, I went on to do a postdoc in African American Studies at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. And then from there, got my position at Kent State University. And we have also changed our name. So we are now the Department of Africana Studies.
Excellent, excellent. I'm really excited to hear all of y'all kind of talk about your journeys, and our theme tonight, as I said, is from one generation to the next. And I want to open this up to a dialogue. So I'm not going, we ain't gonna go one at a time, however y'all want to do it. But I want you to think about that, this theme makes me think of Frantz Fanon's quote that every generation out of relative obscurity must discover its mission and either fulfill it or fail it, right? It's y'all are up, y'all at bat right now. And I want you to think about your work now as scholars, and particularly as in terms of curriculum development, mentoring new scholars who are coming through now. And I wonder if you could tell me how your experience in the department, Africana Studies Department at Georgia State, prepared you for the academy as a person who has to mentor and who has to develop new curriculum. And now we're gonna open it up, so y'all don't have to wait.
Cam, you talking or are you just over there thinking real hard?
I'm always thinking real hard. You want to go?
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
So I'll jump in, right? So I'm at Buffalo State College in Buffalo, New York. I've got kind of this split appointment between sociology and Africana Studies, and part of my hiring there was to come through and help develop the Africana Studies program. And that was the thing that really excited me. And I got there and they're asking me about curriculum. What does this program actually look like? Or what do you think it should look like? How should we move through it? And I felt so prepared to answer those questions and to kind of implement those things and make those recommendations based on my understanding of what my undergraduate experience looked like. Buffalo State is a comprehensive college. We serve a predominantly undergraduate student population. A lot of students, it reminds me a lot of Georgia State. A lot of, students of color, a lot of Black students, a lot of Latinx students, a lot of first generation students, a lot of kids, a lot of young folks, and some, non-traditional folks or whatever, older students who may not have thought college was for them, right? And what we're doing in Africana Studies at Buffalo State in a lot of ways is using our class to kind of activate those students who are just happy to get, they're like, I'm here. And it's like, cool, you here. Let's turn that on. Let's turn you up. Let's put you out. Let's put some things in your space to help you think about the world around you and your place in it and your role in it. As we're building up curriculum, one of the things I actually brought some, a page from Georgia State's book in your class, the pilot of the class last fall called Concepts and Theories in Africana Studies.
I still think about that, Dr. Akinyela.
Yeah. Same here.
That class got me ready for grad school.
Yes, it was everything.
Yep.
Yeah, so like borrowing ideas from that curriculum and understanding the importance of like service learning and putting students back in our communities so they can understand that connection, as that's intrinsic to how we think about the field and about the discipline. And it activates something in them that says, okay, I had this experience connected to this field and maybe I can see myself in a different way. That's what happened to so many of us at Georgia State. We got to see ourselves in a way that, maybe we hadn't seen before, and it lit something for us. So that's kind of the starting point for me. I'll step back. I got more to say. I always got more to say.
I remember that theories and methods class. Was it theories and methodology?
Theories and concepts.
Theories and concepts. I feel like that class that is required for majors at Georgia State. African American Studies is a graduate class. I didn't know I wanted to go in academia. Let me start there. I thought maybe I would be a psychologist. I was a double major in psychology and African American Studies. Georgia State is a research school. Georgia State Africana Studies Department is very research oriented, but it has that strong cultural, political, grassroots impulse, which defines what type of academic you can become. And I didn't know how that was going to look altogether, but I know by the time I got to the end of my degree, I was forced into leadership positions that I hope I did well at. I had already presented at a national, academic conference in the field. And I knew I was going to grad school. I remember sitting down with Dr. Moja, Dr. Jones, various people, Dr. Gales, just talking to everybody, you know, and Dr. Jones has said, I think you need to work with this Black psychologist, Dr. Mercedes Sutherland at SUNY Albany State University in New York. And so I'm gonna apply there. So I applied to 3 programs. That was one of the ones I got into, but I went there. But I know that Georgia State had really, I didn't even know the power of Georgia State until, you know, you leave, you gotta leave home, and then you can see like, what are the tools that I'm actually working with, what type of facility with this information and with my orientation. You know, I didn't really think of myself as a Black nationalist till I left. And then I was like, I'm a nationalist, I'm a nationalist. And people were like really tripping about that. So I was like, okay, I've been primed, I'm a Pan-African nationalist. So I was like really into that, but not even with the sort of political identity piece, but it had fueled my engagement in the classroom. It made me unique, it made me stand out, and it pushed me to even read things completely outside of that, because I was having to debate people from all over the country around different issues. I felt like Georgia State is a very much grounding place in the understanding of Africana studies as it is, cultural grounding, you know, academic excellence, and community service. I think one thing that's really special about Georgia State is it fulfills the mission of the discipline. And when I left and I went to grad school, I felt like I had that. I did not feel like a fish out of water. And another thing people was talking about was the community that we created at Georgia State. We still have, we're still friends, we still meet at Kwanzaa. Like, you know, that actually does impact your academic success a lot more than you may think when you're an undergraduate. You need peers, you need intellectual groups of people who think like you, who could push you further. So having that intellectual community and the grounding and the culture and the intellect together is really a sharpening tool that I will always credit your state for making sure we were prepared, because the world is cold, people. World is cold, okay? Academia is cold, but you have to build your community intellectually and socially, and then you will be on your way.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else about that in terms of in terms of your own mentorship and curriculum building? How does it get affected?
So I know for me, after, you know, coming in through the graduate program, you know, I will never forget Dr. Davis's mock review that we had to go through. Let me tell you, like, that is a process in itself that I still have traumatic thoughts about. You know, it's still some little, you know, I still shiver at night sometimes. But no, it was one that truly prepared me, so much so that I do it to my students in my capstone seminar class. So we go through a very similar process. And I remember reaching out to her and asking like, hey, can I get like kind of like your outline? Can I get kind of like the setup of what you do? Because that was so helpful for me, because I was able to do my research, you know, have people critique me, get that, you know, feedback, get it back, put it into my work, and then, you know, return it back. And I said, I need to make sure my students in undergrad, because I'm in only an undergraduate program, so there's no graduate program at VCU. So I want my students to get that now before they get to grad school, so that they can be prepared to get those critiques, so that they can be prepared to take in those reflections, and how to you know, and move that forward versus waiting till you get to grad school and having to experience that. So for me, that was, you know, truly a gift that I'm like, okay, we're going to take that back. And then after being in your class, you know, theories class, I now teach theories at, you know, at VCU. And it's like, I take a lot of what I got from your class, a lot of the text, a lot of the way that we facilitate class. Like my students every day facilitate class. So, you know, you're getting that practice already. You're becoming the teacher for the day. You're gonna, you know, and so many of them leave saying, thank you for giving me this opportunity to do that. Like I was shy before and didn't think I could do this, but, you know, I'm prepared now, and they've been able to do it in other classes. So, you know, a lot of the tools that I gained, I've been able to implement and see those, you know, the rewards, you know, being, you know, reaped, and students, you know, being like, yes, like I'm so glad I got this, and I wish I had got it earlier, but thankfully I got it now. So yeah, just being able to feel like I've contributed in that way in my own class through the curriculum, through offering, these mock reviews, and yeah, it's a game changer. So I'm like I said, forever grateful for that.
Absolutely.
Mhm. Yeah, I'll just share really quickly. So yes, I also had to endure
Yes.
Dr. Sarita Davis. Woo! What that did, and so many other professors, just first of all of the faculty at GSU are on point. Like in terms of the academic rigor, your expectations. I remember being in Dr. Akinyela's class. I wasn't even looking at myself as a scholar, right? I'm moving into the program thinking that, okay, I want to learn more about Africana Studies. I'm here to learn. I'm ready to expand my knowledge, right? And Dr. Akinyela is like, no, you're a scholar. So there was a molding happening of us as scholars. Dr. Davis, as we've already said, really pushed us to develop a research agenda. I didn't know what that was. I just had things that, I thought I was interested in, but she's like, no, you need to be clear about what it is that you want to study, why you want to study, and this is how you actually conduct research. And so I've carried that forward in so many ways. I think that I have very high expectations of my students. I issue out rubrics like because that was something that Dr. Davis was really big on, just being very clear about this is what's expected of you. This is how you write a discussion board post. This is how you take a quiz. This is how you successfully engage with this material that we're exposing you to. And so, that's one aspect of it. And then I want to speak to the cultural aspect too, because I did concentrate in the arts and culture track in my master's. And so it was Dr. Jones who said, I think it was either Dr. Jones or Dr. Akinyela Umoja, who said, or the both of them, you need to contact Dr. Shirlene Holmes. She does Black theater. She would be a great mentor for you. You can get into some, works that she's doing culturally around campus. And so I did, I took that advice. I took her class. I took her Black theater class. She only had undergrad classes, but she actually created space for me to take those classes as a master's student. I also connected with Dr. Doris Derby, may she rest in peace, who was the director of the cultural center there. I'm not sure, I forget the name of it. But actually, when I started at Kent State, my first position for the first 4 years while I was there, I was directing our cultural center, our Center for Pan-African Culture. And so much of what I saw Dr. Doris Derby do in terms of incorporating community into, that academic space, ensuring, as Dr. Abuya said earlier, that I'm fulfilling the twin mission, right, of Africana Studies, not just being a scholar just for scholar's sake, but also bringing in that community and taking my responsibility to the community very seriously. And so I just wanted to speak to both of those, the culture and the academic.
Wow. I appreciate all of that. And also, I appreciate all of y'all's passion. Students used to come to me sometimes, and if they weren't excited about their research, I said, I'm not excited about it. And I think one thing y'all, obviously, I hope everybody can hear the passion that y'all all have in this field that you really love. And as you were all talking, I began thinking, oftentimes when new students come to Africana Studies, or people who are outside of Africana Studies, when they think about Africana Studies, they think of it as simply as this is about Black history. But y'all are going in diverse areas. I mean, y'all didn't take the time, and I'm hoping you'll take it now to talk more about more specifically the kind of research you do and how Africana Studies influences and impacts the way you do your scholarship, right? Which obviously, historical knowledge is at the center of all of our work, and it's necessary, but y'all are not necessarily simply Black historians.
Right.
I'm wondering if y'all could have some dialogue and just talking about your own research a little more fully, what you're doing and how Africana Studies influences and shapes the direction of your own work and research.
That was phenomenally put.
Hmm?
Phenomenally put.
So now talking, Patel.
Historians, actually, I think influence are historians, or maybe can't. No,
No.
that
no.
is such a thing. Everyone thinks African American Studies is a pseudonym for African American history, which is not
Right.
true.
Yes. Mhm.
I specialize in theories and methodologies. Thank you, and also psychology, cultural theory, and that's what I was saying. You know, I started out, and I was really impacted by Baba Asa Hilliard, who was also at Georgia State at the same time, at the very end when I was there too, and just the power of the department's exposure to, I always tell people this, I was a psychology major and an African American studies major, but I did not read any Black psychologists in the whole time I was a major for 5 years at Georgia State. Everything I learned about Black psychology, Black cultural phenomenon was through the vehicle of African American studies. And that was pretty much sustained throughout the trajectory of what I do. And so at this point, there's something different happening in our field that you can't capture there. So there's various ways that you can approach Pan-Africanism. The book I'm working on now is looking at the relationship between the Yoruba people and African Americans and the shaping of African American culture. Regardless of your 23andMe, there's a fundamental thing that unites us besides the experience of oppression. I try to lean out of that argument, which is something I'm unlearning or relearning through the methodologies of African American studies, because if you argue that the only reason that we're united is because of our collective oppression of slavery, then once that is gone, there is no motivation for us to work together, be together, to care about each other. So I'm looking at other ways that people have been united over time. And so through the vehicle of Pan-Africanism, through the methodologies of African American studies, it allows me to remove Europeans out of my mind and to think about the relationships between various African people that have shaped the entire world. And so I think that is something that is unique to our field. You do not have to do history. I do theories and methodology, psychology, and cultural theory. And then there's all these beautiful people on the panel who are going to talk about that good research.
Yeah, when I talk to students and my colleagues and stuff like that, people from outside the field, and talk about the central thing that I keep coming back to, and this is, you know, established here in my time at Georgia State and then refined when I was a graduate student at the University of Louisville in the Pan-African Studies Department there, is that Black studies, you know, Africana studies, it has an epistemological contribution to the world, right?
That's one of those theories and concepts words, brother.
Know it. That big joker, you know, epistemological. What do Black people say about their experiences?
Yes.
About the world around them? What do we say?
What is our starting point?
Yeah, Black folks at the center, at the starting point of like creating knowledge. What do we say about ourselves? All right, and not even just about ourselves, because it's not just me searching, but about that waterfall over there, our relationship with the cosmos, with the ecology, with our society. That is the starting point. We set our feet right here and we look outward, we look inward, we look around. You know, Lamar, you know, dead center, looking around, section 80 is right there, right? So like, that's where I'm trying to get students to understand and people to understand. That's what we're doing. That has historical, you know, historical applications and foundations, psychological, cultural. You can, in theater, you know, what is August Wilson saying about Black life through his plays and, you know, those performances and stuff like that. That is an expression of Africana studies, you know, thought. And that shows up in my work because that's the question I'm always asking. You know, for me, my work centers around Black folks' relationship to the state apparatus, right? Why, when Black folks show up in cities or in cities, what are they supposed to expect from the state as citizens, right? And then what do they do in the context, in situations where that their rights as citizens are being neglected or undermined? You know, how do they mobilize to address their needs? Because that is the current, you know, ongoing condition of Black folks in urban spaces. Always away, you know, when the state is coming up short. And that was shaped by my experience at Georgia State, riding my bike back and forth down Decatur Street to campus, watching the public housing get destroyed. And not
Okay, the boys.
yeah. It was driving, going out to New Orleans or whatever in Mississippi during Katrina on the ground, during, with Sankofa with the 42 students from Georgia State, and driving out there and talking to people who had lost their homes. And they'd be like, yo, the state ain't been by here. We drove by a field at like 1 a.m, a football field worth of FEMA trailers lit up. And we get to the place and we're asking people what's going on. And it was like, we ain't been here. And me and Nelson Tyru, Jasira and them, we're like, yo, this is supposed to be here and it's not here. And the state has neglected its responsibilities to Black folks. So what do Black folks do in that situation? How do we create spaces and meaning for our joy, for our existence? And that starts, it's really hard to find that happening in sociology because there's a deficit oriented about how Black folks are framed as problems. And how do we solve Black people's problems? Africana Studies says, who are we and what do we want for ourselves? And how do we create
that? Y'all so smart. Y'all so smart. So yeah, I'm not gonna go last. I'm gonna jump in.
Yes, I'm letting you go.
Come on in, Dr.
Yes.
Ali.
So wow. So yes, the notion of Black lived experience, right? I'm very much concerned. My research is really around when folks ask me, what is your research or what do you study? I always say, it's interdisciplinary. So it's Africana Studies, it's a little childhood studies, it's theater, it's performance, it's film. And so for me, I'm interested in how young Black people experience growing up in African-centered communities, growing up with African-centered ideology. So someone said earlier, getting the white man out of our head, or not even looking at things through a European lens. So much of us, you talked about Fanon earlier, right? So much of us spend our entire world, somebody just talked about Du Bois, right? This double consciousness. We're looking at ourselves through the lens of the oppressor. We're understanding ourselves or misunderstanding ourselves through a lens that's not even our own personal lens. We don't even get to come and understand ourselves because we're warped from very young ages, from the womb, and conditioned to think about ourselves and understand ourselves in ways that are unnatural, in ways that are only in service to these oppressive systems. And so for me, I'm very much interested in what these lived experiences are, what the parenting practices are, because I want to know how it can be replicated. Can we replicate this 1,000,000 times over so that we have a bunch of, woke children walking around, who turn out to be adults who can, and I don't even want to do that. Let me back it up. Let me backtrack, because you don't have to be an adult to create change. So who can start to create change? And we have lots of examples, evidence of that. My work actually documents and captures some of those narratives around young people who are enacting change in their communities, in their homes, helping their parents to become more conscious, about who they are and their space in the world and the things that they can be doing. And so that's where my research lies, definitely interdisciplinary. But again, it's grounded in Africana Studies, as was said already earlier. It's really starting there and thinking about who am I to myself, and not always in relationship to or in response to white supremacy. Who am I in response to my history, my own heritage? Who am I when I think about who African people are at the core, in its essence?
And I was just thinking, your master's thesis was around a play about your experience as a child growing up in that African-centered family, right?
So no, not the master's thesis. So I did end up doing that work at the Cultural Center.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. So yes, I have done work around that. The name of that play is Our Liberated Justice, and I have since converted it into a solo performance piece called A Political Prisoner in My Mother's Womb. So yes, the research, thank you for that. The research, not only takes shape in terms of, book chapters and articles, but, it's also has iterations that are performative. And
Mhm.
so I do have a research and film, documentary film series also called Seeds of Revolution that explores these notions. And it's also intergenerational. So I'm not just looking at children, I'm also looking at elders and everybody, in between.
So Dr. Gibson,
Yes.
what's comic books got to do with Africana studies?
Woo, well, let's see. So let me begin with a phrase that was told to me or told to the class from Dr. Gales in 2010. I remember him saying, Blackness is not monolithic. And that is like one of the first statements I always tell every class I teach, regardless of whatever the class is. I always start with, Blackness is not monolithic, because so often, we hear the phrase, oh, well, all Black people are alike, all Black people look alike, or this. And so having to kind of make that statement really sets the tone. So in a way, I started out not per se with comics as the focus. It was more so like what everybody's been talking about, the experience. And I wanted people to see that Africana Studies is not just Black history, and that we don't start at slavery, that actually, if we really want to get technical, we can start at San Francisco State, where it all got started. And so, talking about activism, talking about the community's role in changing the landscape, talking about the way in which students played a role, and why is that not talked about? If we're saying that Africana Studies is Black history, why is what happened at Georgia State, not in there? Why is not what happened at San Francisco State in the history books, if we're supposed to be this, Black history, thing? So, starting out talking about that and, setting that tone and showing how activism kind of runs through us. And so, which then leads me into kind of like me being this pop culture activist within comics. So I'm always looking at, like, I'm a comic book nerd. Like, I've been one since 4 years old, since 1984. And I always was like, I don't see me. Why am I not here? And we all over the place, and we're all over pop culture. So in this medium that I'm, in love with, why am I not seen and not, present there? And, when I finally do see myself, it's in an adult, in that of Storm. And, it's kind of like, okay, why is the representation, adultified? Why is it that we're not seeing, kids? And then why are we basically seeing women, Black women, looking very hypersexual, very, exposed? And I'm like, this is not how Black women look. This is not who we are. We're very multidimensional. So, this idea of representation comes up, and I'm like, okay, as much as I'm reading and as much as I'm seeing on the TV and in movies, how can I bring in this conversation? And that's what Africana Studies is always about, that representation, why we matter, why our experiences need to be told. And so I'm looking at that through this lens of pop culture, which in a way like draws students in, because I'm like, I got a PhD in African American Studies. I did my dissertation on Black female superheroes and comics. That's what you can do with Africana Studies. And so the eyes become like, wait, oh, you can do that? Yes. The floodgates are open, the world is open, for you to do it. And because we are present in everything, and because we are, a people who change the landscape of the academy, change the landscape of the world, politics, it's, we have to, see ourselves present there. So Africana Studies allows me to be able to make sure that my voice within pop culture, my voice within comics, my voice within, those larger mediums is always present, and that we're always represented, and not in a way that is for someone else's benefit or for someone else's entertainment, so to speak.
Well, y'all all make it clear that Africana Studies is, yes, history is a part of this field, but it goes far beyond that in the work that you do. And I want y'all to just take, in the few minutes we've got left, what about the hard part?
You mean going natural? Going
Y'all
Which
have all
hard part?
gotten, y'all have all gotten
It was a
into the
lot.
field. I know y'all have gotten into the field now. Y'all are all, well-established scholars in this field. What has been the biggest challenge for you moving from being student scholars to being academics, and representing this field? And just, you don't have to just think about it for a second.
So for me, the challenge is that I want to make sure that every student succeed. And so I take everything very personally, in the sense of, like, I'm going to be there for the student sometime above and beyond, maybe sometimes more than I should. And, I tell my students sometimes they get on my nerves, but I still love y'all, but it's that wanting to see them wanting to make sure that they're treated fairly and doing that work. And sometimes I'm like the only one doing it. And so that becomes kind of hard when, everybody else is doing whatever, and you're like doing a lot of the work. And, but, I can't not do it, because it's kind of like, it's that calling. It was, it's that handing, passing the torch. So, trying to find the balance to make sure that I also maintain my mental health, but that I, see that my students are not just surviving, but thriving, as we, have kind of mentioned already before too. So, it's important, especially now, since the pandemic, that, mental health has become really a big thing. And, trying to make sure a student like just stays at the university and stays in the department. Because so often it's like, well, I don't have the money. I gotta take care of my family. What's gonna keep me? Why should I stay? And so, really trying to make those efforts and being there for them, being those support systems. I tell some of my friends, I said, I'm a professor, I'm a social worker, I'm a financial advisor, I'm an auntie, I'm all of that to my students. And I've only really been qualified and trained for like maybe one or two of those things, so, but like I said, it's an investment, and a lot of that was shown to me in my master's program at Georgia State. So it's like, if someone could do it for me, I need to make sure that I can do it, for my students. So it's not a challenge of like a bad thing, but just a challenge of like ensuring that I find that balance and making sure that we see the next, generation of Africana Studies scholars coming through.
Absolutely.
I'm glad you said that about the generation, because I was literally thinking that the challenge, if I had to articulate it, is actually the pace of the growth of the discipline. There is no real neat next generation. I found myself from an undergraduate to now being a faculty, simultaneously always learning and teaching at the same time. There's not these neat moments of matriculation. Now I'm just learning. Now I'm just reading. Now I'm just writing. Now I'm a mentor. Now I'm a teacher. No, it all happens simultaneously. That's very unique to our discipline. And because of the emphasis of sort of the hierarchical sort of, approach to the discipline, you need to expect that you are going to be held to the expectations of teaching, mentoring, learning simultaneously, regardless of your status as student or faculty. And I think that's something, especially for early professionals in the time management, although it's a lot, I think that made me better prepared than people I was seeing as junior professors who were in other disciplines who were like, I never taught my own class before, I don't know what to do, but you just got a full-time tenure track job, you know what I'm saying? I felt over prepared for that position. Like I've been making syllabuses since I was 20 years old. You know what I'm saying? Because of Dr. Akinyela. Okay. So, but it is still a lot. It is a challenge. But I will articulate it as the pace and the growth of the field. Some people don't know this. Black studies is the fastest growing non-traditional field in the academy. It precedes women's studies. It precedes gender studies. It precedes performance studies and all the other studies. And the rate at which we have produced journals, professional departments, professional organizations is outrageous. And we need to take a moment to say, good job. You need to keep up with that pace. We are not behind. We have really done a lot in 50 years. And it's really hard to amalgamate the impression is made on the world.
Mm.
And so my job, my challenge is to be just as good as the pace of the growth of the discipline.
Mm. I know Dr. Herman and Sunyali, you might have a thought, but I just want to say, I think that there's a Q&A space down there. So if folks who are participating have any questions, go ahead and start putting those in, and we'll get to those questions as well. If you've got any questions for our panelists. Dr. Herman, Dr. Sunyali, do y'all have a thought on what the hard part is?
Sure. So yeah, definitely echoing the multiple roles, like playing these multiple roles, big sis, mentor, mama,
Right.
daddy, everything. But doing it with love, like I don't regret any moment of mentoring, of really paying it forward, because so many people took me into their arms, into their embrace. And like I said earlier, ushered me through, this process. And not only at Georgia State, but like I said earlier as well, Dr. Umoja helped me all the way, all the way through Kent State, and so many others. And so I feel like it's my duty, right, to give back in that way, but it does get exhausting. It gets very exhausting to wear all of these different hats. Another challenge for me is feeling like I have to teach my colleagues, and not Africana Studies colleagues, but across the campus, across the university. So when I'm sitting in those university committee meetings, feeling this burden, but also it is a privilege to be able to teach. It is a privilege to be able to have a voice in those spaces and to change the narrative in those spaces. But once again, it's a great responsibility, and sometimes it does feel challenging. And then I'll say the third one is the fact that we do not have a lot of majors. Most of the students that take our courses are students who are taking a course to fulfill a diversity requirement. And so often it's challenging to really get some buy-in from those students who don't really have a commitment to the field. They're really just trying to fulfill that credit so that they can graduate. And so it's teaching in a way, it's pulling students in and maintaining, their attention, and really, showing them the broad spectrum of what Africana Studies is and also what it isn't. And it's challenging to do that with folks who, don't necessarily have any background. They didn't take a prereq to get in your class. And then they may not ever take another one again. So again, it, can feel like a lot of pressure to be put in that space of, I know that this is probably going to be your only experience with this, with these topics. So those will be the challenges that I can identify.
Thank you.
I echo the roles and everything that everybody said. I think my contribution here is the challenge of institution building, right? Trying to build the department, trying to build a program that's viable and sustainable beyond, the new cohort or the rotating, in and out of new professors and stuff like that. And part of that challenge is, coming up with kind of a clear vision that there's some buy-in on, but also kind of battling with the institution itself, with the college itself, and saying, hey, this is actually really valuable. Our intro classes are filled every single semester.
Yep.
And there's always 35, 45 students for a 30-person class. There's the demand here, and we're serving a need and trying to articulate that in a way that allows us to obtain the resources necessary to build something that creates the pathways that we had as undergraduate students. That is a really difficult challenge to do, especially when you're on the tenure track trying to make it.
That part.
That's the real hard part.
Having that institutional buy-in. So I think that's the biggest challenge. But I think that's that is part of the work, a core part of the work of how I see myself in this academy, because I know that this space was not created for people like me.
So we actually got quite a few questions up here, and everybody doesn't have to shoot for everyone. In fact, some are even at specific people. So let's see if we can get through. As we've got as many of these questions as possible. Kamari wanted to know, and Kamari wants y'all to know that they're graduating 2025, right? They are major graduating in 2025. And they want to know what made y'all go into teaching university level instead of, say, K-12. Anybody want to hit that?
Yeah, the autonomy.
Okay.
Yeah.
The
like-
flexibility.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, so the autonomy, the flexibility, being able to have that schedule that I have as a collegiate professor, but still, if I want to go into K through 12, I can, maybe not necessarily be the teacher, but I could come do a workshop. I can come, do Saturday school or something. So actually being that a professor allows me to kind of do both, in some sort of way. So, yeah.
That's good. I would say quickly, because I have one line. Grace said the good stuff, but in K through 12, you have the access to shape individual minds. In college, you have access to shape institutions.
Mm-hmm.
So,
That's good.
Yeah, that's the only thing I would add.
So, and Teresa Santos wants to know, does anyone believe that there's a way to incorporate a greater use of technology for data collection and research into curriculum to gain a marketable advantage in a society that is now focusing their marketing on diversity and inclusion?
Ooh, it sounds like a Dr. Davis question right there.
You want to hear it again?
Yes, please.
Okay. Does anybody believe that there's a way to incorporate a greater use of technology for data collection and research into curriculum to gain a marketable advantage in a society that is now focusing their marketing on diversity and inclusion? How do y'all use technology these days? And do you use it in your research?
Okay.
I think that's
You stumped them.
I think those I've been kind of like thinking about like, okay, where are the spaces where I have not seen, what have I not seen in my Black Studies experiences, right? In terms of course offerings and things like that. And I'm thinking about, things like urban planning, things like computer science and stuff like that. Those technologies, that use of technology as part of the field has implications for how Black folks live in the world. How do we bring that more inside of kind of the curriculum? So students are learning how to use things like, I don't even know if they use CAD anymore, but CAD for like engineering, the statistical analysis of R and things like that. We're getting pieces like that. And then even using like Google Suites, things that people use a lot. How do we incorporate those things in our classroom? Because I'm finding that I know how to do those things. My colleagues do not. I find myself training them. So I'm like, let me help my students learn how to use these ways to do some of the things that we already do, like collaborate, like develop plans and stuff like that. And maybe that.
Well, let me give a shout out to a colleague of mine, Dr. Kanika Robinson, who's at Furman, who hit me to this thing called Mentimeter. And it's something that I use in my class to kind of like, a lot of times for students who don't want to be identified when they talk. So like, maybe they'll write in their journal post, but they don't want to participate in class. And so with Mentimeter, you can create these questions and they can answer them anonymously, but they can also be used to like, you can track that information. So it saves it for you. I can come back to it. I can maybe look at even the themes and pull that out and, come up with, different, studies could be even come from that. I can create different ways of engagement, with the material that I'm using in class. So, these are tools that are, I'm finding are very useful and helpful in, facilitating class, getting information from students. They're like plus size, as it relates to like tenure, because it's like, oh, look how you're interacting with the students and you're using these tools that are, engaging, that are new and fresh and innovative. So that Mentimeter and Kahoot are often, are two things that I use a lot, technologically wise, and the students are actually excited about them. So much so that I remember in my theories class, when one of the students was facilitating, they end up using that as part of their facilitation.
Mhm.
So, realizing like, okay, these are tools that not only me as a professor can use, but students can use it as well. And if I as a professor can use it, we can definitely see the benefit, even larger. So those would be kind of like two small ways, technological ways in which I'm kind of like engaging, where we can even still look at DEI, but incorporating the technology so we're not only solely focused on that.
Excellent. Dr. Suni Ali, we've got a question just for you. It's personal. Do you still find time to work your artistic practice in the midst of all your responsibilities? And that's the first question. And then there's a second part of that for everybody. For everybody is, for the entire panel, do you feel the field of Africana Studies is evolving, or do certain truths always remain constant? Interesting. So Dr. Satya, how you find time to do your artistic stuff with all this stuff you got?
Man, listen. So I actually infuse it in what I'm doing into my research. So I think this is one of the skills, again, that I learned at Georgia State. So when I moved into my theater PhD program, which, is this artistic space, I knew that I had to bring Africana Studies to it. Right. And so vice versa, when I knew that I was going back into the field of Africana Studies, I knew that I was going to have to bring in the performance aspect, the art, the culture, the creativity, so much so that I have actually helped to change my departmental handbook so that it recognizes creative scholarship. And even my colleagues are now, not even feeling comfortable using the term traditional scholarship because, I have expressed that, scholarship takes many forms. And so, one doesn't necessarily, take precedent over the other. So to answer the question, I feel that what I have done is I intentionally interweave it into the work that I'm doing. So as I said earlier, I do a documentary film series. And so I'm always, taking pictures, interviewing folks, and then creatively presenting that. So basically my research gets presented in a creative way. When I was, director of the Cultural Center, I actually started a youth institute. So going back to that question about K through 12, so like Dr. Gibson said, I moved into the academic space because I was very interested in research. I know I'm going back to answer that question too, but very much interested in research and the opportunity to be able to do both, still go into the K to 12 space. And so one of the things that I've done at Kent State is I've started a youth institute of academics and arts, the Fulani Institute of Academics and Arts for youth. And so through that institute, I would direct and write plays that we would produce for Kwanzaa every fall semester. So those are some of the ways that I've kind of infused it. I can't let it go because it's a part of me, and yeah, I wouldn't be happy if I didn't.
For all y'all, is this field evolving? Now, this person kind of puts this contradictory thought there. Is the field evolving, or do certain truths always remain constant?
So
yeah,
go ahead.
No, go ahead, Grace.
So yes, I agree that the field is evolving, but I feel like there's still much more that can be done. There are, yes, spaces and places where some people are still in the very traditional mindset and are not opening themselves to what the field can do and can bring. And so but that it's a constant learning. So as Dr. Suni Ali mentioned, like having to kind of break away from this idea of what is traditional and having to, we are teachers of each other. And so while, yes, the field is definitely evolving and it's changing and growing, but I definitely still feel like there's more work that can be done, more understanding that, we're not monolithic in the thinking of as a field, and that there's so much to that it can offer if we allow for that to happen.
I don't even know if I like to say a pushback, let me start this. I teach a graduate level pro seminar in African American Studies class at Temple, which is basically an entire class on what is African American Studies, what are the major debates, who are the major players, and what does it mean to be a professional in the field. And I can say that as much as I think to have fundamental truths is still a goal of Black studies, I would argue that it's mostly evolving, because even in all these hundreds of pages of things that I'm reading and teaching, we don't actually agree on the same origin story. John Henry Clark says Black studies started at the moment that African civilization clashes with European civilization in the 1500s. Other people say 1968. Some people say Black studies started when we first had HBCUs. Black studies started when the first Negro free school during slavery. We actually have different origin stories. We have different ideas of are we a discipline? Are we interdisciplinary? We have different ideas of what theories, methodologies go inside or go outside. So I would argue that while Black people come together around the idea of Blackness, it is very much still a very lively debated. What is our origin? What is our goal? Is it Black liberation? Is it institutionalization? Is it something else? And I think that everyone has a role in shaping that, especially you next generation people.
I think some of us might even push back on the whole concept of truths that remain constant, or as Fanon would say, timeless truths. Us might argue that truth, like every other social phenomenon, is historical, which means it's always changing dialectically at every moment. So again, this generation is not holding on to the same truths that that my own generation had necessarily. We've got just one more question here. As a filmmaker, this is for everybody, I believe. This is someone, Jillian Moore, who I think is a filmmaker, says, as a filmmaker, how do I keep the integrity of my storytelling central to a real Black experience in an industry that strives in keeping us in boxes or niche roles? Help this Black filmmaker out, y'all. How do they remain authentic in their work?
So I teach a Black images course, and this is what we grapple with. This is one of the questions that we grapple with. What I would say is you have to commit, number one, to it. I mean, it sounds like you are committing to it and you're looking for fuel, right? You're looking for your motivation, inspiration to continue in that vein. I would say really commit, and then also surround yourself with people who are committed to that same agenda. If you move into spaces where people are not committed to that agenda, then you're going to be, either asked to or coerced into compromising. And so you have to commit yourself, and then you also have to look for folks who are doing work in the way that you want to do work. And just also be faithful that where you want to be, because it's not a secret that when you do things a certain way, you may not reach the plateau that you want to reach, or you may not be in certain rooms, or your film may not be, produced or screened in certain arenas. But you have to have the faith that what you've committed to is what you will do, regardless of what you may lose in the process. That's the kind of sacrifice that you'll have to make in order to hold true, to that agenda.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I think we're coming close to our time. I want to thank all of our panelists, first of all these amazing scholars, activists, for taking time out to come back home and to I'm sure you've inspired some of that next generation of rising scholars that will be coming even after you. I'm going to just leave this moment if each of you would have anything that you'd like to part with for us.
It's always good to come home to, and it always, especially when you're, welcome with open arms. And, I will always say that Africana Studies, you know, Georgia State will always, I always feel like the arms are always open, and that it's going to be a forever home, you know, so to speak. Like, regardless of where I live, regardless of where I go, like, I know I can always come back here, and to know that each one of us has said that in multiple ways, like, shows the legacy, shows the influence, shows the love and commitment that has, you know, been able to be in that department and continue, you know, even through us. So yes, it's always good to come home, and you know, this is one of those type of things where it's like, oh yeah, when Dr. Emoji hit me up, it was like, no question, absolutely, yeah. What day, what time? Do I need to move some things around? You know, so yeah, and when you all create that kind of environment for us, it makes it easy for us to come home.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I've been looking at the questions, and there's a lot of questions about kind of the future of Africana studies. And I think this will be my closing comment. For me, the future of Africana studies, it is evolving as new generations of folks come up. Queer folks did not always have a place in Black studies. Black women did always have a place in Black studies. So as more people enter the conversation, whether that's inside the academy or inside the community, Black studies, as long as it is in touch or in, you know, engaging with the communities, with the Black folks, you know, who make it possible for us to stand up here, you know, as scholars or whatever, as long as we are in touch with those communities and listening, that's who we are accountable. The field will continue to evolve. It is imperative on us as scholars and as community members to ensure that our work is always engaging with the needs of the folks who are possible for us to be here. If we're not doing that, we are not serving the discipline. We are not serving our communities, and we are not doing Black studies.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Dr. Ali, are you on? In my screen, I see Cam and then Mesco. I'll just say this. So you go. Dr. Ali.
Okay. So I was just also scrolling through the questions, and I saw that my Baba Bilal Sunni Ali had asked a question about how we see scholars or professors of Africana studies like John Henry Clark, who taught youth in Harlem, and he talked about students of Africana studies becoming activists. And so I'll speak to that a little bit. And one, I'll say to all the students, class of 2025 and others who are here, you are in great hands, right, in this department with these set of professors who are also like your mamas and babas and uncles and aunts, all the roles that we talked about earlier. So journal your experiences, accept the challenge because it's making you greater. And in terms of the student activist piece, that's one of the reasons why I continue to teach in Africana Studies, because I am not just teaching, I am mentoring and molding folks who will change the world through, you know, whether it be through education or film. I want to shout out Nyla Henderson, who's on this call. Maybe she's still on, but she was one of my students at Kent State University, and she was in an entirely different department. And now she is a master's student in this program. And so I know that through the work that I'm doing in terms of mentorship, in terms of directing the cultural center when I was in that role, and also teaching, I am molding the next generation of not only educators, but activists who will organize and make positive change.
Sounds good. My final comment, just thinking about Georgia State, thinking about the discipline, thinking about people who are potential students who are out there. One of the things that you should remember is that when you're entering Black studies, you're entering a different paradigm. We're not even competing with white studies. We're not competing with white people in the academy, because we're attempting to do something different, and that is the continuation of African civilization on the planet. You know, we're illuminating the Renaissance of African people. We're engaging the ideas of African people everywhere. We are, you know, here to do something other than think about ideas in offices. And when you enter this larger project in the spans of human civilization beyond the academy, you understand that Black people are 1 in 5 people on the planet. We're not a minority. We never have been. And so we need to be able to capture that energy and what it is that is really incumbent upon us and what we have access to, which is everything. And so that's why we're so invigorated. We're so energized, because we will never run out of things to do. Africana Studies ain't going nowhere. And in fact, most of the other disciplines have begun to amalgamate themselves to model our theories, methodologies, and approaches to learning.
That's right. That's right.
Mhm.
Absolutely. So once again, thank you all to our panelists. Comrade brother Bilal Suni Ali, shout out to you. I wasn't ignoring you. I didn't get down that far before I saw it. So glad your baby girl was able to catch it. But thank you all. Hopefully everyone who is here has gained something from this. I think this has been a powerful way for us to commemorate the fact that it was students that make it even possible for us to be here. And every one of these panelists that was with us today carried on first that legacy of being students at Georgia State. And now they are out in the field leading the way as mentors and scholars in the field. So thank you all for being here with us tonight. Look forward for our follow-up Freedom School sessions. And we just say, you know, as we say in my tradition, free the land. Free the land.
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 Yes. Shout out to you being a great moderator also. Thank you.
Yes.
Like, you were awesome. Yes.
Good to
Yes,
see you,
thanks
Brother
for
Harmon.
having us.
Good night, everybody.
All right.
Night.